Good afternoon, everybody. So this is Fatima Hatami, an MA student in Communication and Journalism, UNM. I'm full prize scholar, and we worked with Dr. Schaefer to organize this cross-disciplinary colloquium series to promote mutual understanding between the community of the UNM at large. So today we have Fawad Ali Shah. He's a PhD student in Communication and Journalism, and Syed has worked for different newspapers and radio stations back in Pakistan. And today he's presenting something on identity, religion, and politics, the impact of war in the Middle East on South Asia, including Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Hi everyone. So with the recent, you might have heard recent news of Afghan Taliban capturing a major city in Afghanistan and kind of Afghan forces leaving those areas just for the militants to rule, and now they are trying to get the city back with the help of American troops. And in Syria, the militants are advancing. They are divided into different groups. So in today's talk, I will try to kind of link the militancy in Syria and Afghanistan, Pakistan, and kind of try to see how those different militant outfits in the Middle East, Pakistan, and Afghanistan relate to each other, and how they pose a threat to global security together, and what's the role of international security agencies in the kind of in the power dynamics in the whole situation. Since I'm from Pakistan, I will begin with Pakistan and how my country played a role in this whole mess. And then from then onward, we will discuss the role of Afghanistan, India, and Middle Eastern countries, and especially United States of America in the whole global security. So Pakistan got independence from British rule in 1947. However, during the division of the Indian subcontinent, some issues remained unresolved, including the issue of Kashmir. So Kashmir is an area that is still disputed between Pakistan and India. Pakistan holds a chunk of the Kashmir territory, and India holds the other part of Kashmir. So Pakistan and India are the two powers, major powers in South Asia, and due to the Kashmir issue, both are at loggerheads all the time. So the division of Pakistan and India, the Indian subcontinent, was based on religion. The then Muslim leaders of the subcontinent claimed that since Muslims and Hindus were two separate nations, therefore Indian subcontinent should be divided in two countries. One country belongs to Muslims and the other to Hindus. So the division was based on religion, and two different identities came into existence. One, Muslim identities, Muslim Pakistanis and Hindus. And then no one thought about the Hindus that were living in Pakistan and the Muslims who were living in India. So they lost their identities. Well, then came the Cold War era. Pakistan sided by the US forces because our military needed US help, and India sided by the USSR. So we had division in South Asia, Pakistan siding by US and India siding by USSR. So there was a clear division, and then Afghanistan was basically, we had communist government there, and they were siding by the India. So Pakistani security, since Indian were strong, they had a large military, they had resources. Pakistan compared to India didn't have much resources. So on the eastern border, our security agencies thought that they were threatened by the Indian forces, and then on the western borders, they thought that Afghanistan would threaten them, and in case of any war between Afghanistan and Pakistan, Afghanistan would side by India. and that would endanger the existence of Pakistan. Then Afghanistan. Afghanistan borders Pakistan, Iran, and Central Asian countries that were once part of USSR. So it bordered USSR during the Cold War era. During the late 70s, the then Afghan communist government invited USSR to invade the country so that they could establish and strengthen the communist government in Afghanistan. Now, before going into the details of militancy, I just want to discuss the demographics of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So 80% of the Pakistanis are Sunni Muslims according to the last census that was held in 1998. And 20% of them are Shia. Majority of the people living in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of the Pakistan and the federally administered tribal areas that border Afghanistan are ethnically Pakhtun. 45 to 60% population of Afghanistan is also ethnically Pakhtun. So there was that ethnic bond. Once Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and the federally administered tribal areas of Pakistan were part of Afghanistan, and then they were divided by the British Empire to divide Pakhtuns who were resisting the occupation of their territory. And then Pakhtuns occupy the southern and eastern provinces in Afghanistan. So when Russians invaded Afghanistan, CIA and Pakistani intelligence agency ISI collaborated to defeat communist governments or USSR in Afghanistan. Pakistan had its own benefits and CIA had its own thoughts. Like CIA wanted to defeat USSR, the communist ideology in Afghanistan, and Pakistan wanted to defeat Afghan communist government that were siding by the Indian governments then. So, and a rule in Afghanistan and a friendly government in Afghanistan would provide Pakistan's strategic depth. So in case of attack, in case of war between Pakistan and India, the Pakistani government could seek help from Afghanistan or could use Afghanistan to store ammunitions or to do trainings, etc., to use it for guerrilla war purposes. So we had our own. So during that era, Pakistani intelligence agency ISI and CIA trained militants, not only Afghan Pakhtuns who had migrated after the Russian invasion to Pakistan, and those were at that time more than 4 million people. They lived in the Pakhtun-dominated areas of Pakistan, since both were ethnically, like the border areas of Pakistan where they were living were ethnically Pakhtuns, and those who migrated were ethnically Pakhtuns. It was easier for our intelligence agencies to use those refugees as a tool against the USSR invasion in Afghanistan, so they started training those people. Meanwhile, CIA recruited Osama bin Laden and his friends to side by Russians, to side by the Afghan government and fight against the USSR government. So the Arab money also started flowing into our region, and that was the time, for the first time, we witnessed Kalashnikov and like large armory. My father and grandfather used to tell me that before 1980s we didn't have open, like we didn't see anyone having a Kalashnikov or a big rifle in hand or rocket launcher, but since the beginning of the Cold War, like everyone could roam freely with hand grenades, with Kalashnikovs, with the support of our intelligence agencies and with the financial aid and technical support of CIA and Arab governments. And that was the time when the whole social fabric of Pakistan and Afghanistan changed. The people were trained and they managed to defeat USSR in Afghanistan. Then the US governments and Pakistani governments had no backup plans. By then our government had changed the whole school curriculum. Nowadays you will listen or read a lot about Pakistani seminaries, religious schools that kind of creates militancy. But I beg to differ, because I guess that the schools run by the Pakistani government are creating more militants than the religious seminaries. Because in the 1980s, with the help of University of Nebraska, these Pakistani scholars say, they developed curriculum, and in the schools they would teach like A for Allah and G for gun, J for jihad. They started teaching those things, and they started indoctrinating kids from the early ages. And then they kind of created those subjectivities, Muslims as one nation, and Hindus, Christians, Jews are all liable to be killed. Like, you can kill all of them in order to create a global caliphate. So the mess started from there. Once the Russians were defeated in Afghanistan, Pakistani intelligence agencies, they thought that they could defeat India in Kashmir too. So they kind of created more training camps, and like the number were in hundreds. And then since the kids were indoctrinated, they were showing up at those training camps. And we kind of created hundreds of thousands, I guess, of Kashmiri militants who would go and fight with India in Kashmir. There was a vacuum of power in Afghanistan, and Pakistani intelligence agency, ISI, once again used Pashtun religious scholars who were living in Pakistan or were trained in Pakistani schools or religious seminaries, and they created Taliban who could rule Afghanistan and side by Pakistani establishment in case of war with India. But then, and once Taliban rule was established, the Arabs and Chechens, Osama was displaced from Sudan under the CIA pressure. He went to Afghanistan, and they kind of created an alliance. After the 2001 unfortunate 9/11 incidents, Pakistan could no more support Kashmiri militant outfits openly. They could no more support Afghan Taliban openly. So what they decided to, since the tribal areas of Pakistan there was no military presence in the tribal areas of Pakistan. Once America invaded Afghanistan, all the al-Qaeda militants and Afghan militants, they crossed the border. Their leadership crossed the border, and they started living in the border areas of Pakistan. So Americans could not attack them. What Pakistani decided as a policy, they started giving refuge to Afghan militants in case America leaves the region, so that we still have upper hand on India in the region, and we could still control Afghanistan. But they were harsh on al-Qaeda militants. Under CIA pressure and under American government's pressure, the Pakistani establishment could no more support Kashmiri militants. They sealed the border with India. What the Kashmiri militants did, they created an alliance with al-Qaeda, and they started attacks within Pakistan. So the people trained by Pakistan, who are basically Pakistani, they created an alliance with al-Qaeda, and they started creating mess within Pakistan. And the Afghans, who were being protected by Pakistani government, they started creating mess in Afghanistan. In Afghanistan. So we captured many al-Qaeda leaders. We couldn't decide suddenly what to do, since we were protecting those militants for like 2-3 decades, and then suddenly after the 9/11 incidents, we couldn't support them openly anymore, and we had to take a decision. And since the whole society was radicalized, the then government could not openly say that we are siding by the West or we are siding by America in the war on terror, because people were supporting by large the militant governments. And especially when you look at the rural areas of Pakistan, where there is poverty, where the government rule is relatively weak, people would support militants still, even despite the fact that they killed more than 50,000 people in Pakistan. People will say that Americans created that mess. And that kind of created a difficult situation for the government of Pakistan. So once we decided, the Pakistani establishment decided to move into the tribal areas of Pakistan to counter al-Qaeda and Taliban militants. they retaliated and they started attacking military installations in Pakistan, schools, and they now, like from 2003 onwards, more than 60 to 70,000 people have been killed in that war, because the militants thought that they have been raised with an ideology that West is our enemy, America is our enemy. Schools were teaching them, teachers were telling them the same things. But then suddenly, overnight, our government decides that no, those who were the freedom fighters of yesterday, they are now our enemies and they are terrorists. So it's kind of difficult for people to adjust to this whole policy change. And we are still going through that mess. Well, now there is a difference of ideology between Afghan Taliban and al-Qaeda and Pakistani militants. Pakistani militants who are allied with al-Qaeda, they fight for a global Islamic rule. We call it caliphate in Arabic. And then Afghan Taliban wants just rule in Afghanistan because they think that since they were the legitimate rulers, they were ruling Afghanistan before the 9/11 invasion, they are the ones who has the right to actually rule Afghanistan. Well, the survival of Afghani Taliban depends on the geographic situation in Pakistan. First, they were in close contact with our security agencies after 1996. And then majority of the people who live in the border areas of Pakistan, they are ethnically Pakhtuns. And people can cross the border every day and they have like lands. Pakistani people have lands in Afghanistan and Afghans have lands in Pakistan. And they have married their kids and there are family relations across the border. And the border is 2,500 kilometers, and the terrain it's a mountainous terrain, so you cannot close the whole border. So it's kind of making it easier for them to cross the border, attack troops in Afghanistan and come back to Pakistan. Whereas the Pakistani militants, once the Pakistan government launched military operations against them, they crossed the border and they are living in the border areas of Afghanistan and attacking Pakistani militants from there. And Afghan government don't have access to those areas, and those are totally ruled by the militants who are basically al-Qaeda allied and Pakistanis. Well, now come to the situation in Middle East. US and CIA once again thought that they could displace the sitting governments in Middle East and they could kind of create a governments that would support their policy in the Middle East, and they could protect their interests through their puppet governments in the Middle East. So they destabilized the whole region in order to achieve those goals. And then either they didn't know or they underestimated the power of militants or the militant ideology in the region, because al-Qaeda wanted to destabilize those governments too so that they could rule those areas. And US thought they could destabilize the region and they could install their own governments. And the CIA totally misread the situation. Once Iraqi government was displaced in Afghanistan, they kind of al-Qaeda militants who are under pressure from CIA and our intelligence agencies, they started shifting to Syria and Iraq to fight a war there. Now, according to Wahhabi Islamic or Jihadi theology, if you read their books, two areas are most important in the whole Islamic Caliphate thing or Islamic global rule thing. Afghanistan and Syria and Iraq, those areas where ISIS is living these days. According to them, according to their books, according to their scholarship, once an imperial power have conquered all the Muslim-dominated areas, some people will resist them. Some Muslims with white flags will resist them from Afghanistan and Syria, and they will defeat the empire in Syria and Afghanistan. So they propagate that Taliban and al-Qaeda are the people who would defeat Western powers in Middle East and Afghanistan, and from there they will start a global campaign to create a global Islamic rule. So Syria and Afghanistan both were important for them in their theology. So they started moving to Syria, they established training camps there, and it was kind of better for us until the rise of ISIS. So ISIL, majority of the members or leaders of ISIS are previous al-Qaeda members who got trained in Afghanistan, who got trained by Pakistani intelligence agencies and CIA. And then they, due to the leadership issues, they formed their own organization, and they found power vacuum in the Middle East, and they exploited it the way they did it in Afghanistan once. Now, interestingly, Saudi Arab, which is a major power in the Middle East, their intelligence agencies are kind of playing a double game too. Saudi thinks that they could impose their Wahhabi ideology across the globe. In Pakistan, they were supporting militants, they were supporting Pakistani intelligence agencies, so the whole militancy, including al-Qaeda people, were supported by the Saudi royals. And the money was flowing from there, and it is still one of the major sources of funding of militancy across the globe. Well, I will give you an example. In order to spread Wahhabi ideology across the globe, they were using oil money. Like, they were not just training militancy, but they were providing fundings to religious schools, and they were providing fundings to like universities just to establish a Wahhabi schools there which could spread their ideologies in different areas. Saudis had historical enmity with Iran, the Shias. So in our university where I was teaching, they kind of spent 1 billion Pakistani rupees to establish a mosque, and we are just a building where they could, their nominated guy could teach Wahhabism to people. And you can see their funding across the globe, and their intelligence agencies wanted Wahhabi rule because they were Wahhabi themselves. But al-Qaeda and ISIL people are Wahhabi too. So initially, Saudi government financed and in collaboration with different intelligence agencies in order to counter Assad regime in Russia, who was Shia Alawi. They funded and provided weapons to al-Qaeda, al-Nusra funds, and ISIL. Initially they thought that they could kind of fund them and they could rule the whole region. Wahhabism will rule the whole region. They also underestimated the power of ISIL and al-Qaeda. They thought that they will dispose, like, they will throw Assad out of Syria, and then Sunnis who are puppets of Saudi Arabia will rule the government, and they misread the situation too. Because once the ISIL started capturing the areas, they say that Saudi Arabians are also puppets of America and we won't leave them. So they now feel threatened too. Well, now the rise of ISIL, many people went to Syria to fight Russia, to fight Assad regime with the help of Pakistan, with the help of Saudi intelligence agencies, and CIA and Western agencies also funded them. Now once the people who fight in Syria and Iraq go back to Pakistan, ISIL's ideology is sectarian ideology because they are Wahhabis, and since the rulers of Iraq are Shia, they kind of think that they want to exploit the sectarian divide in Iraq and Syria. So their ideology is is sectarian. They not only consider Western as their enemies, but they also consider Shia Muslims as their enemies. And they think that in Pakistan, since Shia are in majority, but the perception is that they are well educated and they hold the decision making or policy making positions in Pakistan. So the militants trained by ISIL when they go back to Pakistan, they start targeting like people. Sectarian violence was there, but it like increased manifold after the rise of ISIS. Few months back, people who are later captured by our intelligence agencies said that they were affiliated with ISIS, and they killed 50 Shia pilgrims in Karachi just in a bus. Well, now the situation is Pakistan is protecting Afghan militants who are fighting Afghan government and Russia and American Western forces in Afghanistan, because they think that they are the only, like they have the only card of Afghan militants. So they don't want to lose that card. And now Afghan government either doesn't have the capacity, or they are to counter Pakistani intelligence agencies. They are providing shelter to Pakistani militants who are affiliated with al-Qaeda, and Pakistan still continues to support Kashmiri militants to counter India and Kashmir. The US and Saudi Arabia are sponsoring and funding anti-Assad militants who are associated with al-Qaeda and other militant groups, and the support still continues. Well, none of the governments of Pakistan, Afghanistan, the US and the Gulf countries realize that they cannot continue funding militants against states on one hand and fight extremism on the other hand. Those are kind of, though they are divided, but their ideology is the same. They don't believe in nation state, they believe in a global Islamic rule. They are anti-democracy. So the intelligence agencies think that they are using militants as a tool. Once I was a journalist, I was talking to a militant in Pakistan, and he was like, they are fools, let them fund us, it's not a big deal. Like, we are using them. He was like, they are using us, we are using them. Because we have to achieve our cause. America and the other Western countries and Gulf states have their own mission. They have their own cause, but the militants also understands everything. And they are not under the control of any particular intelligence agency, and they are using them for their causes. Because at the end, Afghan militants, Pakistani militants and al-Qaeda are the same. They want an Islamic state in the region. And ISIL also wants to do the same. So if we start keeping funding them, at the end, like, they will rule. So that's the end of it. If you have any questions.
So the Arab Spring, if we were to go back, obviously many forces, or maybe not obviously, a lot of forces I always thought had a hand in the Arab Spring. So in Tunisia, it seems to have been more of sort of a legitimate uprising of people. But after that, I'm not so sure, because apparently the Muslim Brotherhood was involved in Egypt. They thought that that would help them get control. Do you see the Muslim Brotherhood as a different force, or behind some of the Arab Spring uprisings?
Well, I personally guess that Muslim Brotherhood existed. They had support in masses, and you could see them in the Egyptian elections. They won the elections. Right. And al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood, both kind of Osama and their leader Sayyid Qutb, who were later killed by the Egyptian agencies, they filed the same, like Muslim scholars. They read the same people, they have same ideology, and I guess they had a role to play in the Arab Spring, and they played it. And again, the CIA and Western intelligence agencies misread the situation. They thought that once the Arab Spring is successful, liberals in those countries would win the elections. And since liberals are all over the media, and like they are considered the opinion makers, and Americans just like take decisions based on the opinions they get from people who could speak better English, who could write for English language newspapers. They don't understand, they don't have access to the masses, and they don't understand what they think. So Muslim Brotherhood had infiltration there, and once the governments were, for example, when the Egyptian government, Arab Spring was successful in Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood won the elections. And then Americans were kind of confused themselves, because on the one hand they were crying for democracy in the Middle Eastern countries, and then they realized that people would support the extremists, those who were anti-West, and then they had to support another dictator in order to achieve their goals. So yeah, I guess Muslim Brotherhood had infiltration, and it still has infiltration there, because it has access to the workers, to the common peoples. And the intelligence agencies in the US and the West base decisions, they make decisions based on the opinions of people who live in the posh areas of Pakistan or Middle East, who writes for English language newspaper and use those fancy words, and who don't know like even a single sentence, like they don't know the reality in the rural areas of those countries. They think that the 10% of elite is kind of the whole population. So their sample is kind of skewed. And that's where, and based on their opinions, the decisions are made, I guess. That's my personal opinion.
So I have two questions. The first one is that we don't usually get this kind of perspective on the mainstream media. So, I mean, is there any documentary evidence of all of this happening, or is it just purely hearsay? And my second question is that, since you have a deeper knowledge and understanding of the whole area, what do you think that we should expect in the future? Like, is there a clear winner in the future, or is it just stalemate?
Well, I guess I will start from the last question. I guess militants will win this war if the intelligence agencies continue like to do whatever they are doing. And the evidence right now, the existing evidence is that Americans, CIA accepted, they trained anti-Russian regime people, and those people handed over the weapons to al-Nusra Brigade, basically al-Qaeda affiliated people, all of them. And then they now that like they accept openly and publicly that they are supporting militants who are fighting Russian regimes. Recently, after the death of Mullah Omar, the leader of Afghan militants, so people would start, the journalists would receive calls from Afghan militants from Pakistani cell phones. And Pakistan kind of accepted they exist, but we don't have any, like, we can't force them to leave, we don't have the resources, or we don't have any contacts with them, we don't know where they are, but yes, some of them are in Pakistan. And after the recent attack on a Pakistani airport, Afghan militants started like calling Pakistani journalists from Afghan cell phones, basically from Nangarhar province of Afghanistan, and the Afghan government openly said that they don't have control over those areas. Though they accept that those militants exist there, and we will take action against them, but they won't, because they want to use those militants as a tool against Pakistani government. Yeah.
So, I mean, the follow-up question to that, like, so you said that you think that the militants will win. So why do you think that, and is it like, will it be a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it will definitely be a bad thing, because Pakistani government think that they can use Afghan militants to gain like upper hand in Afghanistan and play a role in their government making. Indians and Afghan governments are supporting Pakistani militants. So the situation is really messy, because neither the Pakistan government can completely finish the militants, because they cross the border and go to Afghanistan, and the Afghan government cannot, and the Western forces cannot finish Afghan Taliban, because they are sitting in our areas. So at the end, if this continues, like our economy gets weaker and weaker every day because of the terrorist attacks, Afghanistan is at the verge of like falling into the hands of Afghan militants, like they have the capacity to carry out attacks there. So at the end, if these games continue, I guess militants will win in a sense that they will prevail. You cannot finish them completely. Their ideology and training camps will continue to exist there.
It seems to me that at the root of all of this is is corruption, which kind of creates a helplessness, especially among the youth in that part of the world. I grew up in Iraq a long time ago. I migrated to this country a long time ago, but I still get some pulse of what's going on in that country. When you talk to people, everybody hates ISIL, but they root for it because in their mind it's, okay, here we have a corrupt system, we try everything, nothing works. And so let's unleash these monsters. I mean, even the people who root for ISIL and al-Qaeda and so on, there is no love really or acceptance of that ideology. I mean, historically, the Islamist ideology was proposed after just before the First World War, when the Ottoman Empire was on the verge of disintegrating, and that kind of took traction. The nationalist movements basically took over, and till now, every nationalist movement in the Arab world and the Muslim world, actually they declared bankruptcy in a way. And people can see that, okay, now they have their backs against the wall. And these so-called Islamists, they hope that they're cleaner and they're not as corrupt as the others. Well, now they're getting a sense, for example, in Egypt, the experiment in Egypt was a failure. Nothing good came out of it. So now people basically are in complete despair, to the point where they are entertaining the notion of, well, maybe even somebody as bad as ISIL will sweep all these corruption and so on, and something new will come. I have some Pakistani friends that I talk to, and I'm surprised that this kind of attitude is even among those educated ones, which kind of worrisome, because, I mean, two wrongs don't make a right. So what do you think? I mean, is that a widespread feeling, the cynicism among people in general?
Yeah, I guess yes, because initially I said that those people are schooled in the government-run schools, and most probably if they are of your age, they got trained and they went through schooling in your age and through the whole process of indoctrination. So majority still, I personally claim, it's my personal opinion, there is no data to support that 90% of the people living in the rural areas of Pakistan are in the major centers of Pakistan still believe that militants could provide them justice, and they kind of they want to get rid of the kind of capitalist and government and democracy, and there are several reasons behind that, because democracy is not working, military rules are not working there, the situation is getting from bad to worse every day, and they look at militants as their kind of who could provide them justice, who could get the situation better for them, and then kind of secure or work for their ideology, that is Islam. So the situation is worse in Pakistan, and that's why our intelligence agencies are still finding it hard to eliminate militancy from the society as a whole, because it's a mindset, and you cannot destroy a mindset within a year, within a two. It will take 40 to 50 years to make them realize that, see, they are not there to provide you justice. They have their own interest there. So this is my personal opinion, because majority of my friends think like that. And again, the Western opinion is based on the English language newspapers, where they call of, like they talk of Pakistan as a secular country where everyone wants democracy and everyone supports democratic government. The situation on the ground is not like that. People don't like democracy, like majority of them, because of the failures of the government, they kind of hate democracy. And that's my personal opinion.
On that optimistic note, I want to thank Fawad Ali Shah for presenting and for being really very professional in not having 50 or 100 people here, but presenting in a way as if there were. And so, thank you. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that before you leave, somehow you influence this country. I don't know how, but you know I hope that. So,
Thanks.
take care.